Yo, what's going on, guys? Crispy Flakes here. Welcome to Extra Crispy. For today's video, we got a video by Hoops Reference, link to his channel in the description below, titled Every NBA Team's Biggest Regret of the 2021 Season. So we're actually reacting to two videos. He's got one for the East and one for the West. So I'm very curious what the Pistons' biggest regret is going to be. You guys let me know in the comment section below. Who do you think your biggest team's regret is? I mean, I could see what, you know, if it was like Tyrese not being drafted over Killian Hayes, but I still like Killian Hayes, so I don't find that to be a regret. Maybe it's not getting more in a Blake Griffin trade or something, but he ain't really been on like on the Nets anyway, so yeah, I'm over that, man. But let's go ahead and check this out and see what it is. Also, I'll let you guys know too, man, that yesterday my LeBron James video I did, that was like a really good video. I had a lot of fun doing that. It didn't really get a lot of views, man. So I don't know if like the title wasn't good or something like that, but it was a really fun video. So if you did not get to check that out, man, go check that one out. It was pretty awesome. It was basically, can I play basketball like LeBron James? It was a good time.
As the 2021 NBA season approaches the end of the regular season, we have a pretty good outlook on how each team looks. Obviously, some teams are faring better than others, but no team has had a perfect season by any means. And there's definitely at least one thing every team can look back on and wish they had done it differently.
Like for real, like outside like looking like at like on paper, and it's like, okay, like this roster's good. I don't think there's like that one team that's like the given favorite right now. I mean, people say like the Nets and stuff because of all their talent, but even them, they have like chemistry issues. They have not played a lot of games together, so.
This brings us to the topic of today's video, where we'll be identifying the one biggest regret that every NBA team has had from this current season.
Not trading Hero for James Harden, maybe?
That they would probably like to have a do-over for. This will be a two-part
topic.
Hero, today's video will cover the teams in the Eastern Conference.
Hero the poster boy of the video, man!
The teams in the Western Conference. Before we start, though, it turns out about 64% of you watching right now aren't even subscribed to the channel. So please, if you enjoy the content...
Yeah, about 100% of you guys watch my videos ain't subscribed either, man. Y'all better go hit that subscribe button, guys! Play around, man!
As not
trying to grow.
A ton, but I would also very much appreciate it. Now, with that being said, let's begin.
Get it.
Going in alphabetical order by city, the first team up is the Atlanta Hawks, and their biggest regret of the season is not being able to extend John Collins' contract.
To what extent?
Collins has drastically exceeded all expectations the team has had for him from the time that they drafted him, and he's now legitimately one of the best power forwards in the league, who fits tremendously alongside Trae Young.
That's fair.
Because of that, you would think that the team's mission would be to get him signed long-term, but discussions between him and the team went nowhere. Collins,
yeah, he's a good player. I don't think he's worth like that max contract. I think that's the difference. Is like he's like I feel like John Collins is kind of like waiting to see like if there's gonna be like a rebuilding team out there that's gonna be like, hey man, like you want that super max, or I guess I want to be a super max. You know what I'm saying?
Has been very vocal in interviews about how he knows there are other teams that are interested in him, and while the Hawks can still match any offer,
I like the Mavericks as the fit
free agency to retain him. Letting things get to this point just isn't an ideal way to treat one of your best players. Next up is the Boston Celtics.
Oh, what was
their
this?
Biggest regret of the season is
Miles Turner and first rounder. Oh my, yeah, that's a good ass trade. Why would they decline that? That's like a perfect fit. Miles Turner's like a perfect fit too for the Celtics. Wow, man.
From the Pacers
and
that included Miles Turner and a first-round pick in exchange for Gordon Hayward.
Damn.
One of the biggest and most glaring weaknesses for the underachieving Celtics this year is the center position, and Miles Turner would have been the perfect guy to bring in.
No doubt.
He's currently in the Defensive Player of the Year conversation. He confidently spaces the floor with his three-point shooting, and he's a low-usage guy on offense, which works perfectly alongside guys like Jason Tatum, Kemba Walker, and Jaylen Brown. Instead, before the season started, they let Hayward walk.
Y'all see Tatum Tots dropped 60 last night?
That ended up getting them Evan Fournier later on. But Fournier doesn't nearly help the team as much as Miles Turner would have.
Agreed.
Next up is the Brooklyn Nets, and while there really isn't much to regret about their season so far, they probably wish they could have traded Spencer Dinwiddie.
Maybe trading Luke Kennard for what's the dude's name, man? Bro, I can't think of his name exactly. I can't think of the dude's name. No, it's the dude that was on the Clippers, bro. I forget. Landry Shamet, right? No, he's been pretty nice for the Nets.
For a player that could have helped them now, with their title window being as open as ever at the moment.
Trading Jarrett Allen, maybe?
Likely done for the season because of an injury.
Is that this season?
The Nets were reportedly offering him to teams at the trade deadline, but they couldn't find a deal in time. The Nets are very top-heavy with elite shot creators, and even when healthy, Dinwiddie's skill set seems like way too much overlap with players like Harden, Durant, and Irving. Trading him for
not a great
player
shooter
or two that could fill some of their weaknesses
He's a creator.
would have been much more ideal, but it just didn't get done. The next team up is the Charlotte Hornets, and their biggest regret of the season is not starting LaMelo
Yeah,
Ball
Coach took a sweet-ass time with
The
LaMelo.
Hornets have been a surprise
Sweet-ass
playoff
time.
contender this season, and their year could have been even better from the start if their coach had been quicker to a lineup change to give LaMelo Ball the bigger role that he clearly deserved. LaMelo was coming off the bench for the first 20 games of the season, and the team had a losing record in that span. Devontae Graham was in a major shooting
Him against
slump
Killing
early on
tonight,
in the
guys.
year.
About to react to that
Ball was
game.
giving them terrific production off the bench, and it was clear that Ball was the better option. Since he got placed into the starting lineup, the team has had a winning record in the games that Ball started. Ball's individual production soared to averaging about 20 points, 6 rebounds, and 6 assists in that span, and had they made this change sooner, they could have had a little more cushion in the playoff hunt right now. Next up is the
Waiting to
Chicago
make a big
Bulls,
move?
and their biggest regret of the season is waiting too long to make.
Yeah, I think it might be a little bit too early to tell, but I'm still like the Vucevic trade. Like, I guess we gotta see what happens to those draft picks. I don't remember the protections on them, but we'll see.
Big move. The Bulls came into this season with playoff aspirations, and with Zach LaVine playing the best basketball of his life, they
He's a
should have
beast.
been aggressively trying
I want him
to
in
get
Detroit
an
so bad.
all-star caliber running mate. They waited all the way until the trade deadline to acquire Nikola Vucevic, which was a terrific addition, and he's
Give
fitting
you
very well.
Griffin's
but
contract
the Bulls are
and a
still
third-round
only
pick.
in 11th place in the East, which isn't even good enough for a play-in game at the moment. Next up is the Cleveland Cavaliers, and their biggest regret is mismanaging
Love.
both Kevin Love and Andre Drummond. The fit of both of those players in Cleveland was always pretty head-scratching because neither of them fit the timeline that the team is currently on
Pistons
right
won
now.
the trade, by the way. We got a second-round pick for Drummond, so we won that trade. People were roasting so hard at the time.
And
to
instead
point that
of
out.
trading them away in exchange for any kind of value, they ended up having to buy out Andre Drummond, and Kevin Love is still on the team, more unhappy than he's ever been. Love is a player that should have been traded probably a year or two ago because his value is tanking with each passing day, and after
His
getting
fault, though, for
nothing
taking
in
all that
return
damn
for
money, but can you
Drummond,
blame him?
Either they've just failed miserably to cash in on two of their best players. Next
we
up
go.
is the Detroit Pistons,
Botching
and
Blake
their
Griffin.
biggest regret is similar to the Cavaliers in that they botched the way they handled Blake Griffin.
Tear it.
Griffin came to Detroit hoping to lead them to playoff runs, but his time with the team ended with him too getting bought out. As the injuries piled up, the combination of Griffin's contract plus his play resulted in his value also tanking.
Yep.
And as a result, the Pistons got nothing out of it besides some dead cap.
That's fair. I don't know if it was like a mismanaged situation though. Just like in the sense that, like, even if Griffin was playing like at his best basketball, like the best the Pistons were gonna do is get the 8th seed. So I really think that trade probably should never even happen in the first place. But I don't know. Like, nobody was offering the Pistons anything for Griffin, and you know, as respectfully so. Like, he wasn't really worth. I mean, I would not be taking on the damn contract anyway. Like, I get it, but at the same time, it's like I think it was just making the most of a bad situation. It's like there wasn't really much that was going to happen there.
Next up is the Indiana Pacers, and their biggest regret of the season is holding on to both DeMontis
Honestly, I don't
Sabonis
have any big
and
regrets as a
Miles
Piston
Turner.
fan this year, man.
The Pacers
I really
are in a
don't.
tough spot with this
Nothing too
because
bad.
two of their best players
been a good
are
year.
best suited for the center position.
Rebuild-wise.
Sabonis is much better offensively, and Turner is much better defensively. The advanced numbers tell us that the Pacers are much worse when they're both on the court together than they are when either one of them
Yeah,
gets
Sabonis
to
gotta be
play
playing center.
with the other on the bench, and the pairing is holding them back. They will have to make a decision on which one they want to keep, which will be difficult, but unfortunately it needs to be done. Next is the
And really,
Miami
man, it's like choosing between like offense and defense too, because like Sabonis, like he's like the man's defense is not the greatest, but like his offense is like off the charts or whatever. Where like Miles Turner, he sometimes is a little hesitant with his offense, but like the defense is amazing. So it's like, what do you pick in that case? It's really tough.
Heat, and their biggest regret of the season is allowing Tyler Hero to be what held them back.
Hey, we'll see how he does in the playoffs. That's where he came alive last year.
To have gone all in on a championship run was perfect for right now, because last year they showed that they were good enough to get there. Getting an elite shot creator and overall offensive juggernaut like
James
Harden would have taken them to another level, but the Heat seemed to heavily overvalue Tyler Hero and his potential. Obviously, it wasn't going to be a one-for-one swap for those players, but every report
probably giving up
indicate that the inclusion of Hero in the trade is what prevented the deal from happening, which in hindsight is a mistake. Up next, we have the Milwaukee Bucks, and their biggest regret is overpaying their core. They successfully got Giannis Antetokounmpo to re-sign with them for the long run, which is great. But once that happened, their priority should have been to create as much flexibility as possible to ensure that they can continue to bolster the team around him. They traded for Jrue Holiday in a move that should help them in the playoffs, but then they gave him a max contract extension.
Yeah, that's ridiculous. I mean, Jrue Holiday's a baller, but like, if that's not enough for them to win the finals, it's like, what do you do from there? Like, I don't think a team's going to take on a max contract, early max contract Jrue Holiday. I just don't think that's going to happen. So they better hope it's enough.
Which really seems like a lot, and combined that with the max contracts of Giannis Antetokounmpo and Chris Middleton, they have 3 players next year that alone bring them to the salary cap.
And Middleton and Jrue aren't like the youngest guys.
If this core isn't good enough to win a championship, then improving is going to be difficult for them.
No doubt.
Up next is the New York Knicks.
Too much Elfrid Payton.
And their biggest regret of the season is giving Elfrid Payton too big of a role. Coach Tom Thibodeau
is too much Elfrid Payton,
who has worked wonders for the Knicks this season, helping them become a top 3 defense in the league. But with this, he's also favored Payton a ton over some of their other talent at the point guard position that has undoubtedly been better than him. With Elfrid Payton on the court, the Knicks are 7 points worse, going from being outscored by 2 points per 100 possessions with Payton on the court to actually outscoring their opponents by 5 points per 100 possessions with him on the bench. Luckily, Derrick Rose has come in and taken over a bigger role, but Payton still cuts.
Bro, he's so bad that where it's like there ain't even like no Elfrid Payton highlights. Like he couldn't find that many highlights, so he's like, I'll just throw Randall on there.
Minutes of Emmanuel Quickley, which I believe is a mistake. Next up is the Orlando Magic, and their biggest regret of the year is waiting so long to give Mo Bamba a chance. Mo Bamba was basically pushed aside for most of the early part of the season, barely playing at all as the Magic tried and failed to compete for the playoffs. Once they unloaded all of their best players in trades and began to tank, then Bamba got a chance to showcase what he can do.
You trade for Wendell.
And since his return to the rotation, he's been playing some terrific basketball. In his last 15 games, he's shooting 42% from 3, he's scoring 11 points per game, and he's doing a solid job protecting the rim, and he's starting to come into his own a little bit. The team invested a lot in him 3 years ago when they drafted him 6th overall, and since that day, they really haven't done enough to develop him.
Maybe most improved next year,
Next up is the Philadelphia 76ers, and their biggest regret this year is not acquiring a stretch big man for their rotation. The Sixers are built around their defense, their dominance inside with Joel Embiid, and their newly acquired shooting that helps everything run smoothly. But they smartly try to stagger the minutes of Joel Embiid and Ben Simmons for periods of the game, and lineups with Simmons and backup big men like Dwight Howard have struggled, because Dwight limits the spacing on the floor when paired with Ben Simmons. The Sixers starting lineup has been one of the most effective
weird
lineups in the league this
year. It's
good
that Embiid's shooting well this year. The last I checked, he was like high 30s for 3. I don't know if that's still the case or not, but if he wasn't shooting well, that'd be a lot bigger of an issue.
Because everyone around Ben can shoot, and it opens things up a ton for his creation, but the team's bench lacks that kind of impact. Next up is the Toronto Raptors, and their biggest regret is not trading Kyle Lowry when they had the chance.
For him.
The Raptors are currently in 12th place in the East. Their season has been very disappointing based on their preseason expectations, and Lowry hits free agency this summer. They had several teams very interested in him at the trade deadline, and cashing in on him.
I guess in all fairness, though, you know, because he's on like a max contract, isn't he? It's like $30 million a season or something like that. So I mean, like, by not trading him, assuming he does walk away, that's still a lot of cap space freed up. And I do think the Raptors, problems go beyond the roster. I think there was a lot of other, side issues out there that
acquiring assets was probably in their best interest, but instead, they overvalued him and risked losing him for nothing this summer. And finally, the last team up is the Washington Wizards, and their biggest regret is paying Davis Bertans an $80 million contract in the offseason. Bertans got paid big money this offseason because of the fact that he was an elite shooter, but this season he hasn't brought the kind of value they were expecting from him at all. He is still shooting over 40% from 3, but he's a complete liability on defense. He can get out of control with his shot selection.
Ain't nobody taking that contract either.
Really contribute much else, so the team was probably better off saving that money and spending it elsewhere. And with that being said,
all right, man, we got the next one here. We got the Western Conference. Check this out. We'll get right into it, man.
We'll be discussing today. Last video we identified said, let's begin. Going in alphabetical
Curry
order
for
by
Richardson.
city, we'll start with the Dallas Mavericks.
Yeah, I loved Curry on the Mavs.
Their biggest regret of the season is trading away Seth Curry for Josh Richardson. Last season, the Mavericks had, at least statistically, one of the best offenses of all time and were ranked number 1 in the league.
Really?
But this offseason, they wanted to address their subpar defense. In doing so, they traded away sharpshooting Seth Curry in exchange for Richardson, who, in theory, was supposed to be a solid perimeter defender and viable offensive role player, but in actuality, he's been pretty disappointing.
This man knows Jay Rich, too.
Last year, the Mavericks were the 18th ranked defense in the league, and this year, they are still ranked 18th in the league on defense.
Damn.
Only now,
gave
they
up
have
offense for
the
nothing.
8th ranked offense after being the best last year. Josh has frustrating tendencies regarding his inefficiency and decision-making, and his impact defensively.
Man talks about Josh Richardson, how I talk about Stanley Johnson.
Make up for it. Next up is the Denver Nuggets.
Weighing on defensive
their
depth.
biggest regret of the year is waiting too long to address their lack of defensive depth. Before the season started, the Nuggets lost both Jeremy Grant and Torrey Craig, who were both incredibly important to their defensive structure as versatile players on that end. And early on in the season, the fact that they didn't really replace them hurt at times. At the trade deadline, they did make a fantastic move to trade for Aaron Gordon, and he has fit in perfectly since he's arrived. But had they made a similar move early on in the year, they could have an even better season than they're already having. Next up is the Golden State Warriors, and their biggest regret
drafting
is
Wiseman over Ball. I mean, yeah. I'm so, I don't know, like, this one's so tough for me, because, like, Wiseman so obviously is the good fit. I still don't know how Ball would have fit. Like, for this season, yes, it would have worked because Clay's out and everything, and, like, Ball and Curry would have been really fun to watch, but, like, long-term, I'm still
drafting James Wiseman over LaMelo Ball. Now, I know this is going to be a controversial one, but it just seems so clear to me that Ball is the better prospect.
Oh, no doubt.
The concern that people had at the time about whether or not he would be a fit on the
Wiseman got a nice
was pretty overblown. Right now, Steph Curry carries way too heavy of a burden when it comes to scoring and shot creation, and both of those areas are where LaMelo Ball thrives, so his presence could have eased the load for Curry.
Yeah, it would have made next year awkward.
Wiseman also hasn't exactly had the best rookie season by any means, and while he definitely has a ton of potential to be a great player down the line, he also has a lot of bad habits that he needs to break before that can happen.
Same exercise.
Next up is the Houston Rockets, and their biggest regret of the season has to be the James Harden trade. In exchange for James Harden, the Rockets received Victor Oladipo, Radions Kurucs, Dante Exum, 4 first-round picks, and 4 pick swaps.
Honestly, there's a regret within the regret, because I think originally they got Karis LeVert, right? And then LeVert was traded for Oladipo. So not only did they regret what they got for James Harden, but also, like, they should have kept Karis.
Draft capital alone may make it seem like solid value for a superstar, but a closer look may say otherwise. They get Brooklyn's pick in 2022, which will probably be at the end of the first round. They get Milwaukee's pick in 2022, which also will likely be at the end of the first round.
Like second rounders at that point.
2024 will still probably be near the end of the first round, and then their pick in 2026 Celtics could be when it starts to climb. Then the players that
5
they
years,
added,
guys.
Kurucs is no longer on the team, Exum hasn't even played yet, and Oladipo played such unimpressive basketball in Houston that when they went to flip him at the trade deadline, all they were able to get in return was Avery Bradley, Kelly Olynyk, and a pick swap. We've seen superstars garner much better value than that in the past, so the Rockets didn't exactly come out of that saga the best. Next up is the Los Angeles Clippers.
Come on, man. You knew I was watching this video, didn't you, man? So that's a lot of money, though. 40 million is a lot of money. It's a lot of money there.
Biggest regret is paying Luke Kennard $40 million.
Hey, he's been killing it as of late. At least he was for a little bit.
Now, this isn't necessarily a regret because he's been bad, but more because the team have struggled throughout the year to fit him into what they want to do. They brought him in because of his premier shooting ability.
So, real, if you guys think about it, man, like, the real regret here is not building around Luke Kennard. It's really giving the coach too much power out there, man, and not being more locked in on him and being like, hey, you gotta get Luke out there in the fit, man. Build around him.
He has shot the lights out this season, making 46% of his threes. But there's been times when he's barely gotten any minutes at all. He's had games where he didn't play at all, and overall the Clippers have outscored opponents by just shy of 10 more points per 100 possessions with him on the bench, as opposed to him being on the court. He's not the best defender either, and despite his tremendous shooting ability, the Clippers probably wish they saved that money and spent it elsewhere on more of a need, because $40 million is quite a bit. Next up is the Los Angeles Lakers, and their biggest regret of the season is allowing both Dwight Howard and JaVale McGee to walk in the offseason. Anthony Davis has made it clear that he prefers to play as a power forward instead of a center, so the Lakers needed good center depth. Last year, both Howard and McGee played valuable roles in spurts as the team won the finals, but allowing Howard to leave in free agency and trading McGee has made its mark on this season. Marc Gasol is very much over the hill as a player. Montrezl Harrell doesn't bring nearly as much defensive ability as McGee and Howard do, and they lucked out by being able to acquire Andre Drummond when he was bought out. Next up is the Memphis Grizzlies, and their biggest regret
thought Winslow was going to be something. I'm disappointed in him.
Winslow at the wrong times. The Grizzlies are in a weird spot, where they should be trying to win right now because playoff experience would be invaluable for their young core, and they're right on the cusp of a playoff berth right now, but they also have to see what they have in Winslow after trading for him last season. Winslow has been putting into Tyus Jones minutes this year since his return, and with Jones being a very reliable backup point guard, that decision will look pretty bad if they do end up missing the playoffs. Winslow's offensive production has been pretty poor with the Grizzlies this year, shooting it terribly inefficiently and struggling to find his groove elsewhere, and the team is actually about 9 points better per 100 possessions with him on the bench. Next up is the Minnesota Timberwolves.
Paying Rubio?
And their biggest regret this year is signing Ricky Rubio to a contract paying him $17 million per year for 2 years.
They did that? Why?
Coming into the season, the Timberwolves knew they needed to add a playmaker because their team is filled with a lot of score-first players. So in theory, Rubio was a fit. Unfortunately though, Rubio has really started to fall off this season and is having what is easily the worst year of his career. His passing ability hasn't impacted the NBA. He wasn't nearly as much as they had hoped it would. His scoring has been dreadful. He's poor on defense, and his contract now looks pretty bad in hindsight. Up next is the New Orleans Pelicans, and their biggest regret.
This one was stupid. Steven Adams on this team made 0 sense at the time. I was like, "What the hell are you doing, Stan Van Gundy? You have ruined the Pistons already. Do not be ruining Zion."
Acquiring Steven Adams. Adams has a pretty positive reputation in the league, so this one may sound surprising. But despite Adams being one of the strongest, toughest, hardest-working team players in the league, he just isn't what the Pelicans needed alongside Zion Williamson. Zion is one of the most dominant scorers in the paint we've seen in a while, having a historically great year around the rim. But Adams' presence clogs the paint. When Zion and Adams share the court, the Pelicans get outscored by about 2 points per 100 possessions. Meanwhile, when Zion plays without Adams on the court, they actually outscore their opponents by 4 points, making it a 6-point swing without him. Plus, when
Adams would be amazing on the Warriors.
Adams is making
like next
$27 million this
well,
year,
maybe not
it
great.
just wasn't
Draymond.
a need. Next up is the Oklahoma City Thunder, and their
Holy
biggest
Muscala.
regret is not trading Mike Muscala. We all know how much the Thunder
What a
love
bum,
their
man.
draft picks, so with Muscala demonstrating a solid ability to work as a stretch big man that definitely could be valuable on a contender's rotation, I'm kind of surprised they didn't trade him at the trade deadline to try to garner more picks for him.
I'd give you a damn
Up
7th
next,
round
we
pick.
have the Phoenix Suns, and their biggest regret this year is drafting Jalen Smith in the top 10. This year's draft was
who was
filled
after him that
with
they coulda got?
quality rookies capable of producing that look like they'll have highly successful careers, and at the time, taking Smith seemed like a reach to me, and now in hindsight, it still very much looks like a reach. The Suns are already
Right, they did
having
the same thing with Cam Johnson, but Cam Johnson was actually pretty solid, so can't strike gold twice.
But thinking about the fact that they could have had
Yes,
a
you could, in
better
theory,
young
man.
guy to be developing
History
at this
lessons.
time on top of
History
it
class.
makes it their biggest
Gold
regret
rush.
right now. Next up is the Portland Trailblazers, and their biggest regret
Y'all
is
think this-
trading away Gary Trent Jr. So
I've
the
been different about
Blazers
this
made
one.
a trade where they acquired Norman Powell in what was seen as a move that would help them out more in the present. But since that trade has gone down, both Trent and Powell's production have been relatively similar. Trent is also 5 years younger than Powell and
damn.
has shown off amazing potential
good point,
to
okay.
be a highly effective scorer for years to come. Ultimately, Powell will still be effective as they gear up for a playoff run, but making what seems like a lateral trade where you give up the younger prospect with more potential
That's a
could
good point.
come back to
I'm
bite.
convinced now.
Next up is the Sacramento Kings, and their biggest regret is
Yamming on
completely
Christian Wood, man.
ignoring defense. The Kings this year are about to set the record for having the worst defensive rating in a single season of all time.
Wow.
And when you look through their roster,
Really?
it's not really shocking. Almost none of their rotational players are competent defenders, and the ones that are, like De'Aaron Fox and Tyrese Halliburton, aren't enough to mask the
Yeah, I'd be
holes
getting pissed
elsewhere.
if I was De'Aaron
This
Fox if that was the
offseason,
case.
that's something they'll desperately need to address, otherwise another disappointing season will be on the way. Next up is the San Antonio
Passing on
Spurs,
Halliburton.
and their biggest regret is passing on Tyrese Halliburton in the draft this year. Devin
Who'd they get?
Vassell, who they
Oh, Vassell,
actually
that's right.
drafted, is a solid 3-and-D player who will likely have a nice long career, but Halliburton was right there for the taking. He seems like the ideal Spur, and they passed on him. Sure, the Spurs aren't the only team that passed on Halliburton, but they are a team that has typically hit on picks like this in the past, so it's especially surprising. And finally, the
Gobert,
last team up
Supermax.
is the Utah Jazz.
It's a lot of
and
money.
Their biggest regret is giving Rudy Gobert the ultimate supermax contract extension worth the most amount of money they could give. Now, Rudy Gobert has provided truly elite defensive impact over the last few years, and he has a few Defensive Player of the Year awards to back that up. But he's going to be making $46 million
Oh my
in
God.
2025, and I'm not so sure he produces at a level to justify that kind of money.
I don't know if anybody does. Is it the last one?
The Supermax is used on the truly elite superstars of the league, and I don't think Gobert is in that category. He's been known to struggle to translate his impact to the playoffs, and offensively, he's not a go-to option, so to me, it just seems like an overpay, despite how well
Yeah, that's pretty crazy about Gobert. $46 million, man, for 1 year. Oh my God, that is crazy. But yeah, that's the end of the video there, man. Really interesting here. I thought he nailed these for the most part here. I think there's definitely a lot of these were the big time regrets. So what do you guys all think? Let me know in the comment section below. Check out Hoops channel description below. And peace out, my friends.